Thanks for coming. This is session 5. This is focused on education and technology training. My name is Julie Stiles. I am the professional development coordinator for the Connecticut State Library. I'll be moderating the panel session today. We have Ronkowitz, who is the senior designer at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, and is currently designing online professional developments in the New Jersey Department of Education. And we also have Iglesias, who is the assistant librarian at Central Connecticut State University, where he instigated the makerspace at the Library. He also recently edited a book titled Robots in Academic Libraries, Advancements in Library Automation. And with that, I give you Ronkowitz.
Hello. Our time has been reduced a couple of times here, so what we're hoping to do is I'll present, Edward will present, and there'll be time afterwards for questions, although I don't object to a burning question that comes up along the way. This particular session, or at least my part of it, did have homework assignment. At least one person did the homework. We'll see if anybody else did. That's kind of part of the experiment. So I started out in K-12, middle school and high school in New Jersey, and did that for enough years to pick up a pension. And then I moved to higher ed. Well, they call it higher ed, but it's not really that much higher. And New Jersey Institute is the MIT of New Jersey. Oh, good, no laughs. And I've been there since 2000 in various roles, including teaching and doing instructional technology mostly. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about flipping the learning model. And I'm going to make an assumption that everybody has at least heard of the term flipped classroom, which has been used for about 10 years. And flipping professional development outside of education has also been a big thing. I've worked with a couple of companies like Deloitte and things that do this. The idea of not all professional development being done in a face-to-face session. In both cases, the idea is that you want to kind of rethink what you do in a face-to-face session, and can you move some of that professional learning, which is now the preferred term instead of PD for professional development, before or after the sessions, and make some of it more self-directed. So it is a pedagogical approach, and the idea is, if you have no background in it, direct instruction moves from the group learning space to an individual learning space. That means that the resulting group space, when we all get together and meet like this, is supposed to be more dynamic, more interactive learning environment, where the educators are the guides, the facilitators, and less of the presentation kind of thing. Is this a new model? Not really. I would say that it has been around for a while, maybe going back this far. Socrates saying, I'm going to flip the classroom and I'm going to call this homework. First time I heard about the flipped classroom, I said, it's homework, right? You're going to ask students to do something outside of class before they come to class. That's what we've always called homework. And people said, well, it's not exactly that, because, for example, in class you're going to do the lecture. We're going to flip that and throw the lecture out there beforehand, and they're going to watch the lecture and then come to class and follow it. Okay, that is a little bit different model. One of the differences is in the flip model, the practice occurs in the classroom with the guidance of teachers or mentors, and the resources are there. And outside the classroom, the time is spent on preparing for the face-to-face time, or later on if it's a follow-up to extensions to the learning. That is, say you're a math teacher, and you go over something in math class, and then you send the students home to practice. If they have problems, who helps them? The internet, the friends, the parents, perhaps, or something like that. But it's almost, that's where you should be. They should be doing the practice in class. Well, we have no time to do the practice in class. So we send that home. Flipping it would actually bring the practice to class. Of course, we're not just talking about classrooms here, because like I said, we're talking about professional development situations, like you might be doing IT training. Okay? We're all going to meet next Tuesday, we have 2 hours. How many people, when they do that kind of training, have people do something before they come to the training? Anybody? So, for example, in Deloitte, which, Deloitte has Deloitte University, Apple has Apple University, Google has Google University, everybody has their own universities now. If you were going to be sent to Texas from your Washington office for Deloitte to do 5 days of training, about a month before, you're going to get things you need to do on the lawn. If you do not complete those things to a satisfactory level, you're not going to Texas, and your manager will be told that. That is, there are things to do and things that you will bring with you to Texas. And then after the 5 days, you will go back and complete some other things which you might submit online or bring to the next time that you come to the session. That's a really different model. Way too much here to see, but all the slides are up on SlideShare. We'll have a link at the end, so if you want to look at them or use them again or something like that. But flipped learning, the three things I point out here: the time spent per class learning, the time available for doing the other things. It is this time that one of the things we're talking about. Who supports? Who gives feedback? Adults who can support the student. Like I said, who supports the student when they're at home and they need feedback on the practice that they're trying. It's not really a good system. So flipped history in education, it's been around for a while. It's not a new thing. It goes back to, Eric Mazer was talking about this in the 1990s, and they used computer-aided instruction. And then in 93, that very famous Sage on the Stage to the Guide on the Side talk, which has been beaten to death at this point. But, I mean, it was really important at that time. Around 2000, they were calling it inverting the classroom before they actually got to the flip model. And then the real flip model came about the same time. A guy named Baker presented this flip model, and he was using course management tools, kind of Blackboard Moodle type things that we might use. So there's a kind of serendipity to this. There's a kind of discovery, which is sort of important. About 80% of learning is informal rather than professionally planned, so says a lot of the research. We know that students are learning things outside the classroom. We know that workers are learning things outside of training sessions. To make it less serendipitous and more formalized or more intentional is one of the things that goes along with the flipped learning. Serendipity also has to be the name of a blog that is Serendipity 35. So I always like this term, serendipity. One of the things that's been shown, at least in the research, if you like research, is that knowledge retention as a result of serendipitous learning tends to be high because motivation remains with the learner. I'm thinking about the Matt Wells talk and the idea of his mom, getting on board with the technology and things like that. I mean, one of the secrets there is not only that she found it was useful, but she wanted to do it. Okay? To get, whether it's your faculty or your staff or something, to want to use technology, yes, you have to show them why there's a need for it. It has to make their life or their job better or easier. They also have to have a certain amount of at least interest or enjoyment in it. Otherwise, it never really goes as far as it should go. Now, flipped learning emerged from a lot of other trends that are sort of converging, and you see crossovers with a lot of these things. Certainly it owes something to online learning, do-it-yourself, makerspaces kind of movement, blended and hybrid learning because it is sort of that kind of thing. Virtual work and virtual employees. I'm a virtual employee for a job. I work for the National Council of Teachers of English as a social media person for higher education. Other than going to conferences, I do everything sitting on my couch in my pajamas in the morning and that sort of thing. It is a virtual job. Globalization, MOOCs. I've taught a couple of MOOCs, and there's certainly MOOCs that are purely virtual, but there are also MOOCs where people actually meet up afterwards, or meet up before, or they become sort of hybrid. And all of these other things, and of course the flipped classroom, personal learning networks, and a lot of buzzy terms that have been around. So I think flipped learning, flipped classroom, if you're kind of already tired of that term, just move it into other things. I've done a little work with gamification, and that also has kind of bad taste for some people. They're like, every course has to be a game, which is not what gamification is. But somebody very wisely told me about 6 or 7 years ago, they said, if they don't like the term gamification in your school, say simulation. It gets more grant money. And it does. It does. Because like, I talk to my engineers and stuff like that. Simulations. Ooh, simulations. I love simulations. And we can do gamification. I'm so interested in that. Okay, we'll just stick to the simulations. And of course, the influence of the internet and online learning on all of this is tremendous. The idea of lectures outside of the classroom is actually sort of going away, although there's still a place for the lecture. You still need lectures, I think. Even if I do online courses, there's a kind of lecture. They might only be 8 minutes long, but there are something like that. Just MOOCs for a moment. One of the things they discovered in looking at MOOCs, and this is Coursera or edX or whatever you want to do, a lot of teachers are taking MOOCs. I did a MOOC that was really aimed right at teachers at Campus Network called Academia in the MOOC. And that was really the target audience, so almost everybody was involved in education. But even if you're just offering something on, say, physics, you have a lot of teachers, a lot of high school teachers who are taking it to sort of upgrade their skills. They're not going to go back because they have their masters and things and they don't really need another course. They don't want to pay tuition. But they can go into a Stanford physics class online in a MOOC and pick up a lot of what's going on right now in physics and then take it back to their classroom. It is a kind of flipped learning in a way, teacher as student. The other thing with this flip model is adding things before and after. And like I said, we all teach face-to-face with teachers, and we all do training. We do training face-to-face, but we don't often have those other components, something that people do before they come, something that follows it up. A lot of times you go to a training session, it's 2 hours, they introduce this new piece of software, and then good luck, go out there, use it, please, and then they go back and they say, no, nobody's really using it, I mean, that was a big thing last year, and now, like this year, nobody's really using it anymore. And it might be because it doesn't have those two components, so it's something to consider. There are definitely challenges in doing traditional professional learning. The fact that people come with all different experiences and that you have a limited amount of time, especially to practice what you're doing. Like, just thinking again, the software, you introduce the software and then everybody's supposed to go home and try it, in your free time or at lunch or something like that. And actually the practice is what we really need the time on, and the follow-up. A lot of people have done research that shows that virtual practice is as effective as, or sometimes better than, real-life practice. The doctors and surgeons are practicing virtually. The pilots are practicing virtually. And you say, like, well, I hope they also practice on real planes and things like that. Yeah, but imagine the number of hours they can put in before they actually get to the real thing by doing that virtual practice under safer conditions. I don't know if anybody has ever done things like CPR training or anything like that. But a lot of these things have also become virtualized, where you can do a lot of virtual practice before you actually sit down and try it, even on one of those dummies on the floor kind of thing. And you can work out, you can watch the videos, you can see a lot of things before you come to the session. So we don't spend 25 minutes doing PowerPoint slides in order to explain it to you. Okay? So real life practice generally can't be eliminated. And sometimes it is, it's totally virtual, but in most cases we still want that. So then, are teachers teachers, or are they facilitators, or do they become the experts? Well, it kind of depends. Do the learners need knowledge, in which case you're teaching, or do they need coaching, or do they need practice? Or in some cases, maybe they just need access to the resources. You just got to get them into whatever it is they want to do. So thinking about whether you're teaching, or again, doing some kind of training, what is it they need? If they need practice, you really have to rethink the way you do this learning experience. Okay, so a bit about makerspace, which of course is Ed's topic. Another kind of makerspace type flipping is the dry and the wet lab. Is anybody a science person that does labs? Nobody? Okay, I can't screw up on anything I said. A lot of times when students come at the university, they are in the university anyway, and they're going to do a lab, a wet lab, work chemicals or something like that, they They do dry labs before, and they'll do them online. Okay? In fact, they can mess around with chemicals and blow things up virtually before they get to the classroom so that they don't hopefully blow things up in real life. Okay? They can do bridge simulations. They can hit earthquakes on it and wreck the bridge, and then they're going to come and actually try to build the model of the one they designed. So that's a kind of flipping. I looked at a couple of things that are going on in Connecticut, which I'm sure Ed can talk more about, but people talking about libraries or schools having learning commons or maker spaces or places where students can come in and experiment with things. This is definitely a flipping. Whether it's connected to a classroom for education, or it's a totally separate thing to get students interested, or just give them, again, maybe it's just access to resources. How many people own a 3D printer? How many people own your personally or your school? Okay. How many people own a 3D scanner? Okay. You know, laser cutters, things like that. Not many people. So in some cases, these spaces, what they're providing is the stuff is there if you need it. Now, if you say, well, I came in, but I don't know how to use this thing, well, then you also need mentoring and guidance. You may even need some teaching, but maybe not. Maybe you just need a facilitator to work you through it. At Princeton University, down the road from us, they have a maker space. And this is just a little of their kind of policy thing, but basically students could walk in there at any time and use it. Now, at NJIT, we have maker spaces that aren't really that open. I wish they were more. School of Architecture is located for New Jersey there, and they have that, but it's mostly the Archie students that go there. The engineering lab is mostly engineering students. It's not like they kick out the humanities kids, but the humanities kids tend not to go there. The project I'm working on currently at the university is to get other people than the STEM people into these spaces, like digital humanities people to go in there and building things. Some of them don't even think it's what they do. I mean, they don't make things like that. They write things. They don't make things. So that's a different concept. Okay, yes, but. Here's the big but here. What happens if they don't do this pre-work? Hey, I taught English for a lot of years. You tell students read the first 3 chapters for Monday and we're going to discuss it. Sometimes they don't. So what do? What happens if they don't do the pre-work? Are you going to read it with them in class? Oh, that's not a good use of time. You're going to just go along and discuss it with the 3 kids who did read it and let the other ones just, I mean, there are definitely problems with this. When I did this session, the person from CEN I was working with, they said, pair you up with makerspaces, and I said, one thing that we can do is, I said, we can have a little activity that people could try. I don't know how successful it would be, okay? But if we were actually doing a session, you have people bring something to the session. So I set up a web page. It's still up there, so if you want to use it or do something with it. And it was a flipped exercise, which was to look through some of this material on the website and to experiment a little bit with the project I chose because I wanted no money and no special resources needed, was come up with something that would boost the sound on your smartphone, okay? Now, one person did bring something up to me beforehand. I don't know if anybody else experimented. Did anybody else experiment? And I said, this is giving me an example of the fact that what if no one else does the homework, okay? And now we're going to have the session. Well, that does happen. And of course, like any teacher, you bring things because you still need to have things. And I'm not going to take the time to experiment with them right now because I don't know how much time we're going to have, so we'll leave that towards the end. But the idea was, if you had, everybody has, you know, probably a smartphone at this point, and you put on some music. Should put on BB King, actually. Sound is not that great, okay? So how do you boost the sound? And there's a whole bunch of suggestions there, really simple things like just put it in a plastic cup. Any different in a glass one? Make some kind of horn for it. Build something. And you can actually do tests with students. There's an app that you can use for decibel checking and everything like that. I mean, does it change if I move it? What if it's upside down? What if you put it in this way? What if you put, somebody brought this? And students start to also look at things like the materials that are used. Now, if you were going to do this as a kind of lesson, where would you be doing this? What would be the setting for this? Well, the really obvious thing, which if you go to the webpage, it has all kinds of videos and things if you actually want to try it. The obvious place to go with this would be like a physics class, probably. And you could do things and talk about all kinds of questions for physics. It also works with math. I've seen math teachers do this too. They talk about, the different waveforms and things like that. We did it at NJT, and we had some people who do acoustical engineering come in and talk about that. They actually started to then talk about like speaker design. Like when most people think of a speaker, they think of something like my little guitar mini kind of thing. Well, these are powered speakers. These are just ways to boost the volume. We also had a music person come in, and he talked about the fact that do you really just want to boost the volume? Don't you want to improve the tone and the quality? So different materials create more bass, more treble, things like that. So it got from a whole other thing. But could you be even more creative and move it out? And could you get humanities people to talk about this or see how they might take this kind of activity and use it in another kind of classroom? And of course, you can go a lot deeper. Like I said, all the slides will be up there and things like that. And it really could get into high-powered physics and math and that sort of thing in a high school or in a college classroom. So we call this at NJT the design studio approach, and it really came out of our architecture school. The engineering school uses it. And there's a lot of flip going on. Students are doing a lot of things before they come to class, and a lot of things after a class that they bring back to another class. And you can call it homework, but the best is when students go off and do these things, because they really just get into it. I mean, you have students do these things, you see the things students build and bring into class. I mean, all kinds of strange objects to boost the sound in unusual ways. So, one of my summary things is flipped learning is a lot less, I think, about when we learn, because that's what always gets the emphasis. Like flipped learning usually, and more about how we learn, okay? And I think flipped learning is the way we learn in life, naturally, anyway, and we need to take more advantage of that sort of thing. I'm going to let Ed talk, and like I said, we can do questions after his so that we don't eat up all this time. But if you're interested, I mean, that's my Twitter handle. This is the blog that I do. Email, if you want to email me at NJT. The exercise is up on my NJT site. And the slides are on SlideShare, which has all the links and things if anybody's interested in that. Unless there's a burning question, we'll let Ed jump into his. And then we'll do questions again. Anybody with a really burning one? They have to leave real soon. Okay. Thanks. You're up.
Presentation. Yes, you all are here to hear me talk about technology. I'm Edward Iglesias, and this presentation, truthfully, is the first time I presented to CEN, so I didn't know what the audience was going to be like. So this is very focused, and it's really about relationships and the culture of different makerspaces. I'm assuming a lot of stuff. I'm assuming you're all familiar with makerspaces, that you know what they are, that you know about 3D printing, and you know about, kind of the stuff that goes along with makerspaces, like, are you going to have a noisy makerspace or not? Are you going to have a clean makerspace or not? So this this idea of the flipped classroom, I like the idea because there was actually something you could do And I think that the idea for makerspaces is very much tied to the idea of the DIY ethic. And the thing to remember about makerspaces and DIY enthusiasts in particular is they came out of punk rock. And that's the kind of attitude you need to have. The idea that I'm not going to do what everybody else is doing, I'm going to make my own little thing just for me or for my friends. And that's the maker ethos. And if you're uncomfortable with that, you're never going to really get makerspaces. So about a year ago, the Byrne Library, we've had this kind of underground makerspace in cataloging that you have to know about, would have the secret handshake for, on a pilot program for about a year and a half. And about a year ago, the ITBD, which is the Information Technology Business Development Center of Connecticut State University in New Britain, wanted to develop a makerspace of their own. And I got to help them a little bit. I gave them some bad advice about how to buy 3D printers. And we started working together, and more we're trying to collaborate on things, see how our students can benefit them, see how some of their stuff can come back. But I wanted to talk a little bit about culture clashes when you start working with other institutions. If you're going to do a makerspace, it's a very, very good idea, especially if you're a school or a library or whatever, to have a relationship with an already existing makerspace, because they know stuff you don't, like which kind of laser cutter to get, or what kind of 3D printer will clog every time you use it. You know, that kind of stuff, very practical stuff. So it really is important when you're thinking about makerspaces to not think of yourself in isolation, but think of all the resources in your community. And Connecticut has plenty of resources. You know, that you can just Google makerspaces in Connecticut, and you'll find a lot. So I start with some of the basics. You know, so this is the mission statement for the ITBD. You know, and it's someone in a pinstripe suit wrote this. Okay, you know, and it's like you look at the words they use. It supports Connecticut organizations with training and workforce development and all these buzzword. You know, and this is for a library mission statement. And you can right away tell there's going to be a different tone. You know, we're going to be approaching things very differently. They're interested in, they're grant-driven. They're interested in their TRIO students, in building local community businesses, incubator stuff. We're not. We have a very uniform student body where anybody on campus, student, faculty, or staff can come in, use a 3D printer. They'll hang out. It's very informal. So, when you think about our makerspace, this is kind of the kind of people you're dealing with. This is some of my colleagues. For those of you that are in the know, that is Dread Cthulhu remaking himself on 3D printer, evil spreads. So, oh God, you guys need more coffee. But it's an informal space, it's small. We just have, it's literally on a couple of desks that we got extra, and then I got a whiteboard, and it just kind of blew up. Oh, now we have a filing cabinet so that we have stuff to store projects in. Ooh, maybe we'll get a soldering iron. So, it goes, it comes, and that's the great thing about makerspace. You can start a makerspace with an X-Acto knife and a piece of cardboard. Or you can have a big old fab lab if you want. There's no limit. I never want to hear the excuse that we don't have enough money to start a makerspace, because there are a lot of maker projects that you can do with a class that cost less than $5. This is what ITBD looks like. It's very formal. I love the arrow, and you'll notice this guy's wearing a lab coat. So that shows you a little bit of the difference in culture. So when you're dealing with different organizations, you have to take that culture into account. You need a card key to get into the building in downtown New Britain, because And you need a little card key to park and all this stuff. There, it's very professional. They have a different thing. But ours is, you know, you kind of, we're still technically a pilot program, so we don't even advertise our makerspace. So you have to know it exists. A bunch of our students, okay, the things that get printed the most on our printers are Pokemon figures and DC Comics figures. So, you know, you have to get, if you get a couple of geeks involved, the geeks will learn, and they will come. And that's important, because we wanted our makerspace. We have an engineering department and a robotics department. They have very high-end U-print, 3D printers, and you have to use them very specifically. They're part of an assignment. They have to be with the blessings of the faculty. We wanted anybody to just come in here and print whatever they wanted to. We wanted to, for example, I have a faculty member in music who is printing out a different notation system that he invented for his iPad orchestra, because he wanted people to be able to feel the notes rather than read them on a sheet of paper, because that works better when you're doing two hands. Stuff like that. I have an intern from the robotics department who is going to do 400 hours right now and build my evil library robot. and so you never know what you're going to get. That's part of the charm of this. If you don't like the unexpected, makerspaces are not a good place to get into. We have different kinds of users, you know, whereas the ITPD focuses on community users. We have, like I said, a very homogenous group. I mean, they're college students for the most part. Despite that, they're not at all alike, because they all have very different projects. I mean, you'll have, you know, somebody come in with, you know, they'll bring their own multimeter, and they have little, they're working on quadcopters, and they need very specific parts. And that'll be followed by somebody who wants Green Lantern's rings so they can look cool at the cosplay party they're going to. One of our cataloging people did a very good Ark of the Covenant, just because he likes Indiana Jones. So you never know what you're going to get, and it's a little challenging, because none of us know SolidWorks or AutoCAD. You know, we're all faking it. You know, it's like, oh, download it from Thingiverse and hope it works. And so there's a definite steep learning curve when it comes to makerspaces, but it's fun. And this is the main reason to do makerspaces, is if you want some joy in your life, because let's face it, education right now, joy is at a premium. But if you want some joy in your life, have a makerspace. It's a lot of fun. And you get to share with students that are genuinely excited about what they're doing. And I have an MIS class that routinely comes in, and they have an assignment to go and print something on the printers. And you can tell right away, you know, like most of them, they'll come in and wait till the end of the semester, and they'll print their little thing, because I have to do it for my 5 points or whatever. But then they start seeing the little thing going back and forth, and it's like a fire or something, or a bubbling brook. You know, they just get mesmerized with that. And for at least, you know, a couple of minutes, all of a sudden, if they've never seen it before, their world gets a little expanded. They see possibilities, and that's very, very important. You know, the stuff we have is pretty humble, actually. You know, we have a 5th generation printer that sometimes works, a replicator too that right now is busted, and we have a scanner. But I got, all told, that's maybe a $5,000 investment. That's about what, you know, any one of these printers is about the same cost as a laser printer at this point, to run over the year, to take paper into account, and you know, there's, you don't need a lot to start a makerspace, and every makerspace is completely different. It's a good idea to just network, find out what's out there, but yeah, work with other people, because you can't do it alone. Even if you think you can do it alone, you really can't. And I purposely went short so that I leave a lot of questions, and because I don't want to talk at you. I'm hoping that you might have some questions or some observations. Most of the time, when I first started doing these makerspace talks, it was people knew nothing. I mean, they'd never heard of 3D printers, they'd never heard of makerspaces. And then it turned into, oh, we have a makerspace, we just wanted to talk to you about blank. And so I'm hoping that you all will, ask questions of either of us. Thank you.
I teach graduate classes that last 3 hours, so I'm never short of it. So if there are no questions, I'll go to my notes that I just took while I was talking about questions first. Maybe we can talk a little more, we'll get some other things. A couple of things that bounce off of what Ed's talking about. One of the things I think that's a kind of misconception is that you need a ton of money to do this. Because people say like, oh, I got like 3D printers and 3D scanners and laser cutters and stuff like that. I've seen maker spaces where some of the most popular things are sewing machines, good paper cutters, good scissors and things like that. I mean, if you think about the fact that at one of the Google developers conferences, the big thing was that you got Google Cardboard. How many people know what Google Cardboard is? It was a bunch of cardboard that if you put it together and put your smartphone in it, it would be like Google Glass, Oculus Rift, virtual reality, and it works. You can buy kits now where it's all pre-cut for you because, cutting it can be dangerous if you're with the young kids and stuff, giving them X-Acto blades. Not what you want to do. Make a safe environment, but I mean, you don't need that really high-tech stuff in order to have a maker space. I mean, it's nice if you have it and you can do other things, but you don't have to. So like I said, sewing machines and stuff. There was a project we did in New Jersey that I really was interested in. I've been a volunteer for a lot of years with the Endangered Species Program for the state. And there was a Boy Scout who was doing this eagle thing and was going to build bat boxes to attract bats to an area to try to knock down mosquito population and things like that. So he needed to build, bat boxes. And they're made out of wood. But he needed a place that he could go and cut the wood and that sort of thing. So we kind of helped him find a place that could do it. Not a maker space, actually. It was a school and a teacher that was willing to, get the school to do it. One of the kids that was helping him with it had done, I guess, kind of makerspace thing. He did these solar cockroaches, which is another little kit that you can buy, where you learn a little bit about solar power. You make this cockroach, and it runs by solar power, and you can have it do things where it goes in the dark, and it sort of stops and slows down. And when it gets the light, it goes for the light, that sort of thing. He was working with it on the bat boxes, and he said, it would be cool if we could do some kind of solar thing on the bat boxes. So what this project ended up doing, and it's still evolving, is there are solar-powered webcams on the bat boxes with solar-powered motion sensors. So when a bat comes in, it sets off a signal, okay? And you can also record them. They are now working with a kid who's really into the computer stuff to set up a network where you could go online and not only monitor the webcam, but monitor the activity from the different bat boxes. Now, the state gets interested in this because they say, ooh, we could send in our guys from the county who monitor the mosquito population, and let's see if we can actually see a significant change in the mosquito population based on the areas where your bat boxes are active. I mean, this is like a major NSF grant they're looking at here. Okay, but it all starts from a kid wanting to make bat boxes for his Eagle Scout thing. Okay, now he needed access, like I said, to woodworking equipment, but then he needed some computer help and stuff. This could all happen in a really good makerspace, especially if he goes in and he meets this guy who does the computer stuff every day. I can help you with that network. I can help you with the solar. That's not a big thing. In fact, my company is willing to donate like little panels for you, so we can get you a webcam. We've got webcams when we use and things like that. Our name goes on it. It's good public service and stuff like that. So I think that's also a good thing. And you talk about like SolidWorks and stuff. There'll always be a couple of people who are willing to go the next step. We had a video lab that was open at the university where people could come in and use really good video equipment and better editing equipment and things like that. And how many people know how to use Final Cut Pro? Sophisticated Apple software for video editing. Do you want to learn it? No. But there will always be a couple of people who say, wow, this is really amazing what you can do with this. Yeah, and this is what guys are using in Pixar and stuff like that too. There will be a couple of people who want to do that. And guess what? When he brings in his video project, but he needs editing help, he's going to help with the editing. Because now he knows Final Cut Pro. And you probably learn a little Final Cut Pro from him and everything. And that's how the learning sort of goes out in that ripple effect. So, I mean, just some other ideas of things that I think could happen.
And if I could follow up on that, the other thing to keep in mind with makerspaces, and this is difficult a lot of times for teachers, for librarians, to get used to, is the idea that your students are probably going to know a lot more than you do. It's just a given.
Which is good.
Yeah, which is good. But you will never be able to learn as much as an obsessive teenager who has a lot of free time. You know, that's just, you know, you don't have enough hours in the day. At Darien Public Library, where you can see, not Darien, it's Westport Public Library. They have one of the best maker spaces in the country, really, in the library. And one of the things they always talk about is how the people that teach in the maker space are all the students, like high school students that came through and learned the 3D printer a little bit, and then they spent a lot of time and they built one and stuff like that.
A lot of what I'm seeing here is self-motivation of students. So coming on the maker spaces, they have to be self-motivated, have projects or ideas that they themselves want to work on. But how do you bring that back into the classroom? How do you encourage that? So, like you said, you can have these pre and post exercises for your lessons, but not all the students will do it. And then you come in and some will have done it and some won't have done it. I think it really depends on the motivation of the student. How do you encourage that in the classroom setting?
There's going to be different answers for different people. From my point of view, I don't care. I'm not a teacher. If a professor sends their students to the makerspace for a particular purpose, like they do, great. But I'm not trying to encourage anybody to come back to a particular curriculum. Makerspaces aren't about that point. They're about creativity. They're about a different way of thinking. But, and motivation is an interesting idea. They're going to be self-selected, just like the people that go to writing labs. Not everybody will go to a writing lab or a math lab. But it's a resource for students that want the information, not the ones that need it.
Yeah, and I also agree with the idea that not all makerspaces are educational. Like students making their DC figures, it's not necessarily educational. And so, you know, some educators will look at it and go, you know, it's kind of silly kind of stuff. Well, it's not connected to a classroom. But that kid that goes in there and does that may then use it for educational purposes if you can connect with that student to do it. Again, I think the teachers have to open those doors. You know, if you open doors that are enticing, I think you get people to go in. I did a thing years ago, where students would make board games, actual board games, based on novels that they had read. And the game went through the novel. So it was To Kill a Mockingbird game and everything. And what they would do is they would, you know, remix games that they had. They take their, you know, Shoots and Ladders game and use that board and retool it and stuff and make little figures and things like that. I could imagine people with 3D printers actually building Scout, you know, and little characters from the book and having them in the game and making some kind of wheel or building the tree where the things are hiding from Boo Radley or something like that. And you could say, like, well, how does that enhance it? Well, it enhances a couple ways. Building the game is a great thing to do as far as understanding the plot. And, you know, could we have the game go in other directions away from the way the book goes? Yeah, that'd be interesting. Alternate, you know, realities and things like that. But it would introduce them to using that 3D printer. And that might, in turn, be something that you could use in a science class or something. You know, we have engineering students who have to build prototypes. So, you know, makerspaces have other names. Sometimes people say hackerspaces, which is really a different thing. Fab labs, fabrication labs, rapid prototyping labs, and things which are real things out in the real world. So students build prototypes for engineering problems that they're given. and they build them out of 3D printers. There's an example on here. I have a bunch of videos if you're interested in looking at videos at some point. And one of the videos, well, one's from our Newark Museum, which has a great makerspace that's pretty much not connected to any of the schools, which is kind of sad, but I mean, it's almost intentional. But one of them is people doing the makerspace with community groups, okay? And the students bring it back to the school, and they're the ones who tell the teacher. You know, they have this place where you could go, we could actually like build those little tools that we're talking about and everything at this place. Oh, okay, well, let me contact them and see if they'll work with us, kind of thing. So, you know, maybe the school has to do the outreach, maybe it's the students who bring it in. And again, that interest kind of thing, get that student who's in makerspace uses it, and they can bring it in and introduce it. Even in the earlier days, and I go way back, so, you know, I have my trash 80 computers in my classroom. TRS 80, Radio Shack. And the students were better at everything than the teachers at that time. And the best teachers let it go, okay, and said, show us how to do it. And the worst teachers were scared and said, I'm not going to use it in class until I'm absolutely sure we know how the thing works. I don't want the kids knowing more than I do about it. And that's just not the right approach on some of this stuff. I mean, as long as it's not dangerous, I think that's kind of the way to go.
I just want to answer that, about, it seems like you're looking for some motivation for the kids or the interest. I will just say, in the school district I work in, we do spend, in the school I work in, we do give the kids 1 hour per week, free choice, over a long period of time, called creativity hour, genius hour, where they research their own thoughts, learn, and they're a Shark Tank person, they really can develop their idea, and it's about what they learn. We try though to expose them, we're an urban district, to expose them to more things they might not even have an idea about. But we see like great things come of that, just because that's their free choice time, and they're working on their own project, and they have their own plan, and because otherwise it's too structured, it's too much testing, there's too much non-creativity. But that's the leadership from our district. They want to see that more creativity, and the principal is trying to move it towards when can we turn it's like 1 hour for the whole day, for the whole week instead of this. That's the pendulum we're on now.
And out in the work world, that's the Google 20% rule.
Right, that's what we're trying to do.
You get 20% of your time to work on individual projects, which is where Gmail and Maps and a lot of those Google tools came from. People playing around during their 20% time on something they were just interested in. It may or may not turn into a product. Who knows?
So Ken, I wanted to come back to your point about making the figures is not education. I actually think it is. Because they're following something they're passionate about, and they're following a sequence of rules. That's a process approach to learning. Not learning content, but they're certainly learning processing.
Plus, actually, if you're going to make a figure, I mean, what does Scout look like?
Yeah.
The girl in the movie? Or is the girl in the movie not based on the book? I mean, I would have students try to build things that look like the book. You know, the tree should look like the tree, as is described in the book. So you're getting into like real details and things like that. One of the best ones I ever had, there's a book called The Outsiders, which students love. And students built this little Tulsa, Oklahoma, with the streets and everything accurate to the book, not the Tulsa, Oklahoma. So that when you went from the drive-in movie and you made a left and cut through the park and everything, it was the thing. This is years ago. We took photos of it and sent it to the author, Essie Hinton, who replied to us and sent us things and recorded an audio tape for the class about what she did. She said, "You're more accurate there than I am. I didn't even have that in my head when I wrote the book." Things like that. It's pretty phenomenal.
I have a quick question for Ed. Did I hear you say with the 3D printer can make a robot? Because we have robots now, and I can see the kids like, oh, I want to make my own robot.
Yeah, you can, or well, more accurately, you can make pieces of a robot. Well, I actually have, and it depends on what you mean by a robot. You can certainly print a little robotic figurine, that looks like a robot. There's great projects for doing robotic arms, and there's a few different ones out there. They are complicated and require a lot of sanding, but you can build a robotic arm for less than $50 in parts, and most of that is servos. They order off the Hobby King. But there's all sorts of designs out there, and if you can get students to build a robotic arm, all of a sudden they have to learn a lot of physics. Because you learn about, well, how do you make sure that there's enough weight, that the weight won't cause the whole thing to collapse? Or why doesn't it bend forward? How do you make it turn around? You have to learn about rotational velocities and all this stuff. So you can make it as simple or as complicated as you want. You can either, go into a lot of detail and the theory behind it, or just make the little thing go zzz, 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 which is kind of cool too. But yeah, and the nice thing, well, nice or not nice thing about this is you can get either a very finished product that you hardly have to do anything to, or start from scratch and really, customize it so that it's absolutely yours. And I think that's the spirit behind a lot of maker-based things is you want to make one-offs. You don't want to make the same exact thing that somebody else made. And you want it to be hackable. You want to be able to tear it apart and put it back together. And you want to know why you had to, make the whole bottom slightly larger because the flange had too much torque when it turned around and it stuck, and WD-40 didn't have that kind of thing.
Now, we've got a few more minutes for questions in order to give everyone time to get to the next sessions.
Do you have any recommendations for what do you think the easiest to use, like modeling software or anything?
Ooh. There used to be there still is a
If you want to, work with a 3D printer.
Yeah, I mean, when you have, depending on which printer you have, like MakerBot printers have their own software that comes in for very basic stuff like scaling and turning around, letting you view it. There's a program called Tinkercad that's online that I like because of its simplicity, although you'll quickly run across limitations because of its simplicity. But it's a pretty painless way to try and learn this stuff.
I kind of have an answer to that. I use Autodesk Inventor as an engineering student, but Autodesk is starting to push out a lot of free new programs specifically for 3D printing. So if you look up Autodesk Inventor, I think there's at least 2 or 3 ones out there for more of engineering design, and then one for modeling, more of like kind of software.
And the other thing is Adobe is starting to push the 3D printing into its Creative Cloud products. So if you know how to use Photoshop already, there are ways to export from Photoshop as an STL file.
I also heard, I haven't used it yet, but Google SketchUp, has anyone used that before? Because our district uses Google, so it might be.
Google SketchUp isn't owned by Google anymore, is the problem. It's owned by Trimble. So yeah, you can use it. You can download it. I think there's still free versions for education. And some people like it a lot. I personally don't care for it that much because it can get pretty complicated. You have to add in a lot of other programs to make the STL file work and stuff like that. Plus, it's one of those things, if you're comfortable with it, it's great. If it makes sense to you, go for it. And that's going to be true of any of these products. You just need to find one that some people really like Rhino, and others. It just depends on which one speaks to you the most. The other thing is you're not limited by the programs themselves. One of the most fun things to do is draw something on a piece of paper, take a picture of it, put it into Photoshop and then Illustrator, make it an SVG file, then you extrude it in Tinkercad or whatever, and make it a 3D file. So if you're doing something like jewelry where you want organic shapes, you don't want it to look like it was drawn by a computer, that can be a very interesting way and a very interesting approach to do it. And it's great to take something that's absolutely physical and tactile, digitize it, and re-render it as physical.